Hey, what's going on, guys? It's ETAPRIME back here again. Today I'm going to attempt to build a $225 gaming PC in 2021. With PC part availability and GPU prices right now, this could turn out to be an awesome little option if you're looking to game now, but this is not something that you upgrade down the road. This is more of a get me by right now system, so if you just want to save that $220, keep it in your pocket until GPU prices and stuff come down, then go ahead and do that. But if you're looking to game now, this is something that you could do. So for the base of the system, we're going to be starting with one of my favorites. This is an Optiplex with an i5 4590. It also came with 8 gigabytes of DDR3 and a 500 gigabyte Western Digital drive. These go for $99 on eBay all day. And for a base system, it's really hard to beat that price. And sometimes you can actually find these for free on Craigslist, OfferUp, or even your local college. Now this system here has a proprietary 290 watt Dell power supply, which doesn't leave us room for much to do, but I think with the setup we have here, we're only going to pull around 250 watts, which should get us by for right now. Like I said, this is not an upgrade down the road system. So this already has a 500 gigabyte Western Digital Blue drive, and that's what we're going to be storing our games on, but I wanted a faster boot drive, so I went with one of the cheapest options that I could, a 250 gigabyte Western Digital SSD, and a $6 bracket that you can pick up on Amazon. It just makes it easier to mount it into the system, and we're going to be running Windows 10 from this drive here, so it's a bit faster on the boot and load up. And finally, for the GPU, if you do some searching on eBay, you can actually find these for under $100. This is a GTX 960 2GB model. Unfortunately, if you want to go with the 4, you're going to spend a lot more, so I wanted to go as cheap as possible, and I wanted to get more performance than a GT 1030. I bid this out at $98, and there's about 50 other ones right now bidding out. You can get these for under $100 if you're patient. This GPU does require an 8-pin power connector, and since we're working with a proprietary Dell power supply, we don't have anything like that in here. So I went with a double SATA to 8-pin power connector, and we can plug it into the extra 2 SATA ports on this Optiplex. So with this system here, we have 8 gigabytes of DDR3, but we have 4 slots, so you can upgrade to 16 if you want to, and that's about the only upgrade I would recommend. Sometimes you get lucky and get 2 of these caddies in here, and if you do, then you won't need a bracket like this. But they're so cheap, I figured I'd go ahead and pick one up. And since it's not made for this case, I just double-sided sticky taped it right here. Fits in here nice and neat. Everything's super clean. And all I need to do now is go ahead and plug in my power and data. So I got my drives out of the way. It's time to mount this GPU in here. And it's a hoss. I mean, it's an old 960. It's a 900 series NVIDIA, and it doesn't look like it'll quite fit, but they actually do fit inside of these Dell Optiplexes. You do need to move a couple of these cables around. Just detach this from the top, kind of slide it towards the back. And if we angle this GPU in here, we can slot it right down in there, and there's just enough room to clear. I mean, I really do wish that we could have just thrown a 1650 in here and been done with it. That would have been an awesome little card here. No power's required for a lot of them, and they'll fit right in here just fine, but the prices on them right now, as making this video, are absolutely ridiculous. So I wanted to find something more powerful than a GT 1030, and the 960 kind of hits all those sweet spots. It's definitely not a top-of-the-line card anymore, but it should get us by for a cheap gaming rig right now. And since we need that 8-pin for the GPU, we're going to go ahead and plug these in. We'll plug that 8-pin right into the 960 here. Kind of clean up the cabling a little bit. And we're basically done. I just need to install Windows 10 here. I'm going to go with Windows 10 Pro. And then I really want to see how this thing performs. So what we have here is a quad-core 3.3 GHz i5, 8 gigs of RAM, and a GTX 960. I'm going to get Windows 10 installed, and then we'll get right into some testing and see if it's even worth doing this. Alright, so here it is. I've got Windows 10 Pro installed, and I can tell you right now that the i5 4590 is feeling a bit winded. We only have 4 cores, no extra threads. In applications and games that really take advantage of extra cores and threads, you can really feel it. But it's trying its hardest, and for an older Haswell 22nm CPU, it's still kind of holding its own. We have 8 gigabytes of DDR3 running at 1600 MHz, and finally, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 960 2GB model. And this is running GDDR5. So when it comes to putting a PC like this together, this is not something you want to upgrade down the road. Yes, maybe you could throw some more RAM in it. It's pretty cheap right now, the DDR3. You could go up to 16 with this pretty easily. This is more of a PC that you build right now just to get by. With GPU prices and availability of different parts being so high and scarce, this could turn out to be a great option if you want to game right now. Like I said, I wouldn't plan on upgrading this anymore, but you could pass this down to your little brother, your sister, your mom, your grandma, and it can be used as an everyday desktop and get you by just fine. This will even do photo editing and video editing like it sits right now. It's not going to perform like an 8-core 16-thread Ryzen or even a newer Intel CPU, but this will get you by. Now the first thing I always like to do is run some benchmarks, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. First on the list, we have Geekbench 5, single core, 886, multi, 2956. Definitely looking low on the single and multi, but keep in mind of the price of this whole setup. Next on the list, we have 3D Mark Night Raid, 17,623. Moving over to Fire Strike, 6,885. And finally, Time Spy with a 2,634. When it comes to these benchmarks, they're not that impressive, but now it's time to see how this thing can game in 2021. So first on the list, Forza Horizon 4, 1080p, medium settings. Surprisingly enough, I got an average of 79 FPS out of this by the end of my run. Moving over to GTA 5, 1080p with a mix of high and normal settings, we came out with an average of 97 FPS. This is playable, and we could jack some of those settings up a little bit and kind of lock this at 60, but I just wanted to see what we could do with that mix going on. I was really hoping to get a little better performance out of Call of Duty Warzone. Here it is at 1080p with dynamic resolution scale on. I did turn VSync on because when it was off, it would jump up to around 71 FPS, and then it would just kind of fall on its face. It was really trying to overrun itself. But with the settings I'm using now, I got an average of 57 FPS. Unsurprisingly, Overwatch did really well. This is just a very well optimized game. 1080p, high settings, we got an average of 108 FPS. It is fully playable on this machine. Rocket League was really strong. 1080p, high settings, we got an average of 203. Here's Genshin Impact with a high medium mix 1080p 60 FPS lock. You can lock this at 30 and turn it all up to high if you want to, but I kind of like playing this at 60, and I don't mind taking some of those settings down to medium. Street Fighter 5, 1080p, high settings, you can play it all day. No problem at all, we're at a constant 60. Doom Eternal just kept giving me issues. The only setting that I could go to was low, and that's because we have very low VRAM on this. I also had to drop it down to 900p just to get a decent frame rate out of it, and even then, I only averaged 48 FPS. And finally, Fortnite 1080p performance mode set to high, we got an average of 188 FPS. So one thing I was concerned about was the Dell power supply. It's only coming in at 290 watts, so I always measure power consumption from the wall using a kilowatt meter. At idle, 42 watts, which is high, but we do have that older CPU and older GPU. Average gaming, 168 watts, and the maximum that I could get this to pull from the wall while maxing out all 4 cores on that CPU and the GPU, 233 watts. So we are under the limit on that power supply, but it's getting real close once you max everything out. Now, while gaming and just everyday normal use, you're not going to hit anywhere near that 233 watts, so you should be fine with this. So in the end, it's definitely not a high-end 4K gaming machine, but for the price, it's really hard to beat something like this, especially with GPU prices and PC part availability. If you know what you're getting into and you're interested in putting something like this together, I will leave a few links in the description. Like I mentioned, these 962GB models can be had for under $100. You just got to be patient with it, and you'll probably have to bid on one or send a few best offers over on eBay. But for what this build is and the price you can put one of these together for, I think it's a pretty decent deal if you're looking to game right now. So that's going to wrap it up for this one. Really appreciate you watching. If you have any questions or you want to see anything else running on this machine, just let me know in the comments below. And like always, thanks for watching.